Hi everybody, this is episode 36 of the Get in My Garden podcast, and in this episode we meet Matt Ladegaard, a market gardener, entrepreneur, and marketeer, founder of Groundstone Farm in Pojoaque, New Mexico, just north of Santa Fe, where he sells retail at the Santa Fe Farmers Market and wholesale via Squash Blossom, Local Food, and La Montanita Co-op. He went to school for sustainable agriculture and has worked at several farms around the country over the last decade. We cover what it's like to be a market farmer, an overview of the thriving Santa Fe farmers market community, how he leased a small piece of prime farmland for almost nothing to start his market farm business, what the new generation of farmers are doing now to launch successful farmers market businesses, how to market the highest quality local food and not compete on price in a world of easily available cheap foods. He's a super cool guy. Catch him at the Santa Fe Farmers Market on Saturday and Tuesday, or reach out to him via Facebook. There are a few ways you can support the podcast. Please share your favorite episodes on social media and within relevant groups. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or elsewhere and leave positive reviews. And now, this is the first episode where there will be another way to support indie shows like the Get in My Garden podcast via a new platform called What Pods, where podcast aficionados can vote on podcasts for content and quality and help promote them to other listeners. Please have a visit and vote for the show there too. Hope you enjoy our chat.
I moved here only 3 years ago. I was living in California at the time. I started up a little market garden there, but due to circumstances of land prices and whatever, was moving back home to Kansas City, and I drove through Santa Fe. And I'm really into farming, but also seeds and land races and just kind of the old varieties. Just really fell in love with the chili culture, and I found an amazing blue corn out here. I was given some seeds. Nice. And so it kind of just stuck in my mind, and then I was looking for a place to live, and I just chose Santa Fe just kind of for the culture, and it's one of the places where indigenous farming practices are still practiced, and it's just really intriguing.
Cool. So you're a market farmer. That's how you...
Yeah.
Is that what you plan to do?
I came here with a job.
Oh, okay.
On another farm, Green Tractor Farm in La Cienega. I had a job, and I worked with them for 2 years. Like I said, I'd previously started a small market garden, and then I'd work for farms, and I worked for a big 15-acre farm in Washington State. I worked for farms in Missouri. I'd worked for farms in California. After being here for a year or two, I was like, well, I'm not going to keep working for farms. I don't really know what else I'd do with my life in terms of, just skill sets and things like that. And I really enjoy farming and being outside and direct marketing really good, nutritious food to people. And cool. Santa Fe has a really good market and a really good farmer's market. And where else can you farm, let's say, 30 minutes outside of a city that has I don't know the number, but hundreds of, world-acclaimed restaurants.
Oh, absolutely. So how's your arrangement over there? Do you have your own land?
So I lease land, and I live in Santa Fe currently. So lease land, I commute farm, and it's essentially free. I mean, I paid a few $100 for a 5-year lease, and it's raw land. It's raw off-grid land. There's no electricity. There's a solar well pump that I installed. That's it. It's on an acequia.
So the people, did they just want you to use the land? That's just their main priority?
So how it works up in that valley from Pojoaque all the way up to Espanola, they just reached an Amont settlement that was really, really complicated and really long. It was a lawsuit that was in courts for 40 years, finally passed last year. So it means that anyone who has land and water rights and doesn't use them, I think it's within 5 years, they don't use them once every 5 years or 3 years, I think it is, then they essentially are at risk of losing their water rights. So the person I'm leasing land from, they just want to keep their water rights, and the land hasn't been used in 20 years. So it's just a good arrangement on both ends.
That's so cool. Yeah, Adrienne, she was talking about that. Did you hear her episode?
I did.
So I guess that's a positive thing for people, I guess, for the land. Because
it's a positive thing for farmers because it can be relatively easy to just lease some raw land and make a go of it here as a market gardener here because of the markets and, raw land and all that. And to buy land is extremely expensive here. Per acre, I think it's going rate is $100,000 per acre.
Amazing. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
So how does that work? I mean, is that what most people are doing over there? They're just renting land? Like people at the market?
When I think of it, most of the young farmers and small farmers are leasing land pretty much that I can think of. The young farmers, kind of like, whether that's young 20s and 30s or kind of just getting into it, young farmer are leasing land.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, the farmers market in Santa Fe, I mean, it's a beautiful spot. It seems really busy. It seems like a good business point, but like, I mean, it's very affluent. So are you catering to those people? Or are you just what is your market?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, it's a good market, which means that there's good prices. And my market tends to be, more affluent, older people who live in Santa Fe. Not older, but, on the higher end of the age spectrum. And then there are also like, some cool hip young people that love supporting young farms and just vibe with I'm doing. And so those are kind of my people. And also last year was my first year going to the market.
Yeah.
And it was awesome how quickly I got a base of loyal customers.
That's so great.
So there's like, a handful or a couple handfuls of people that were super loyal and really appreciate my produce and came every week. Those are people who just care about good food, have the money and want to spend it on good food. And it's also not like extremely expensive. I mean, $3 for a bunch of carrots is like, maybe you're paying $2.50 at Whole Foods and it comes from California and they're not
it's
sweet.
A big difference to get it fresh.
Yeah. And I also don't want to ever compete with cheap food. I mean, we have an abundance of cheap food in this country and we're at this point where you can even buy good organic cheap food, but that's not my market. My market is really high quality stuff that I touched every seed and I touched every vegetable. I'm bringing really good quality and I need to be able to be compensated for that just to make a livelihood about it.
I mean, we have a huge supply of food in this country and a network to get it around to people, but I mean, right now they're talking about the fact that there's pesticides on everything, so there might be a movement back. I mean, obviously there is a movement back to local food, but maybe it's going to be a huge movement. What would happen if there was some situation that required us to eat locally? How much land do we have do we have people working the land? Could it actually
to support Santa Fe, the city of Santa Fe, you think?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Probably not, right?
Yeah, I mean, what is cool about the Santa Fe Farmers Market is that there is, like I grow primarily greens and, I grow tomatoes and chili and I grow sweet peppers and cucumbers and those are technically fruits, but I grow, lots of greens and vegetables. But the farmers market is great because there are people selling beans, there are people selling corn, there's people selling chili, even though it's not really calorically that big. It's, it's spice of life. And so the market, you can get a good balanced diet there. But I don't think there's enough food being produced in northern New Mexico to feed the population of Santa Fe. And, I don't think people want to. I don't think most people eat, tortillas and beans for breakfast and, a salad for lunch and beans and tortillas for dinner again.
Right.
I heard a story on the radio once. I was, I don't know who it was, but they were talking about how back in the Great Depression, Santa Fe was pretty well off in terms of we were pretty isolated from the rest of the economy and also culturally. Santa Fe didn't have a bad time. Like people had food, farmers made money selling food, and the food was consumed locally, and people were still operating truck farms on the outskirts of Santa Fe, and Santa Fe was a pretty well-off place to be in the Great Depression. So if something like that did happen, I'm sure we could make it work at least maybe not just Santa Fe, but locally in terms of Espanola and Albuquerque. I think we can make it work.
Mm-hmm. So your piece of land, well, actually, a lot of people I've talked to in Albuquerque, for instance, they're making a lot of money using, I say a lot of money, not compared to someone in like a big city, but like they're farming,
Yeah.
So the expectation is not that you're going to make a lot of money necessarily, but some people are really smart about it, and they're using a really small piece of land and marketing properly. And so what do most market gardeners or people who want to get in market gardening need to know?
There's this culture that's popped up due to the internet and due to various things that kind of fight the stereotype that you can't make money fighting or can't make money farming. But yeah, I think that you can make a decent living and you can support a family farming. I think you got to be really smart on your crop varieties. I think you got to know what your customers want and bring that without too many hiccups or hassles and just be efficient.
So do you give it a lot of thought? Like, are you thinking for next year, are you going to do anything differently?
I'm not doing anything too differently, but like I said, I'd farmed for 8 years before starting my own farm. Mm-hmm. So I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I am kind of doing the small scale market gardening kind of type of farming where I only farm on 1 acre. It's me and a few part-time people, but if I was with somebody who was farming with me, it could be 2 people full-time.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing, though. I mean, people, I think, who don't have any concept of farming, they don't realize that in their own backyard they could produce so much food.
Absolutely, yeah. They could produce at least all the green vegetables for themselves in their backyard. But yeah, I don't know the poundage, but I produced a lot of food last year, and it was my first year, so there was obviously a lot of learning curves and things like that, but you can really push it on an acre. And I think just being smart you kind of know, you need to know how to grow food in terms of, I worked on other farms, I learned how to germinate crops right, I learned how to, manage weeds, and it's also pretty intensive where, I grow on a bed system. Let's say carrots, for example, I can grow 4 to 8 lines on one bed, where traditionally it would be rows. Mm-hmm. So there would be a row, a walkway, a row and a walkway, a row and a walkway. With a bed system, you're essentially fitting 4 of those, rows with only 2 walkways. So it's much more intensive on the land. I also use drip irrigation. So I get my water through an acequia, which is from the snow melt throughout the winter, and it's fed into a pond that I have on the property. And on that pond, I pump it out, put it through a filter, and it goes to the drip system.
Really? So you filter it? Is that because of the algae and stuff, or
it's because of the silt and the sediment that will be in the acequia water?
Is it still active though in some way? Like, are there microbes in there?
I'm not so sure about the microbes. I do use compost, so I think that kind of takes care of the microbe situation, and I use mycorrhizae in my plant starts.
Oh, okay.
So just to manage the water really effectively is important out here, especially for growing vegetables, where traditionally people would flood their fields out here, but you can't. They would flood their fields and maybe get the water at best once a week or once every 2 weeks, and you just can't do that with lettuce. It'll die if it doesn't get watered for 2 weeks. So the holding pond I have is really great, and then I can irrigate, for only 30 minutes every day or something like that.
So cool.
Yeah.
The market garden idea, it's like a fantasy of many people. Yeah. But they don't have it in them to like go out and work, and plan and do it right.
Yeah.
It's very daunting. But at least on Facebook, I see people who they're like moving away from the city, and they're going to start a farm,
It's almost this like digital version of the Back to the Land movement from the 70s. But on Instagram it can be so much more romanticized.
Totally.
And I kind of have to like look away from it because they're beautiful pictures, right? But of course with Instagram and social media, you're only seeing the best of it. Yeah, I think people just realize they need to do the work. Like it is about I post really beautiful pictures for my marketing, but that's a marketing strategy in a way. I mean, it's also communicating with fellow farmers about practices and stuff, but you just got to do the work. I'm out there 7 days a week, and
I've never met a farmer who wasn't working harder than almost anyone else.
Yeah, and it's hard not to also like be proud of that or glorify that. It's not good to always work. I had 2 months in the winter where I didn't work, and that was really good. But I'd like to say that people can make a living growing food and selling it, and I think we just have to be clear that profit is the only way, in my opinion, that you're going to convince people to grow food for a living. It's got to be sustainable ecologically, which is a huge important task right now, but you also have to be sustainable monetarily, or else you're not going to have farmers. People can do it on, because the pictures look beautiful and because it's idealistic. But, if you're not making it, you're not going to be doing it long.
Definitely. A lot of people don't realize that, you can say you don't like the market, but, it's actually called a market because people are competing.
Yeah.
And it's trying to get something to you. So.
Totally. And I need, and as the system that we're living, I need to be rewarded with money. To just buy the seeds. I save seeds. I save corn seeds. I save chili seeds. I save some lettuce seeds. But I could not possibly save the 35 different crops that I grow. And so I need to buy seeds, I need to pay rent, I need to, save some money for savings account, and I need to buy groceries because I can't live off lettuce and carrots.
People try.
Right now I'm kind of living off of it's springtime, so the money's all going out. None has come in yet.
Not yet. Soon though, right?
Very soon. So I'll be at market in hopefully mid-April.
Okay.
And I'll be coming with greens, arugula, spicy mix, lettuces, radishes, turnips, and then soon after with carrots and beets, and the rest of the gamut.
Do you ever worry that you're competing with crops that, the other people have them for sure, right? Because these are things that grow without too many problems here.
Yeah.
So is that a worry that you're going to have just a surplus of anything?
I've planned, so I do a lot of planning in the winter, a lot of Excel sheets,
cool.
just to make sure that what I produce comes on in the right amounts consistently every week from April to November. And so I know that I won't be, have no carrots until like July, and then I'll have 300 bunches of carrots and then no carrots again until November. Like, I know that I'll have consistently X amount of carrots, for example, just because I've done that work and that planning. I think that's really important for farmers to do. And then when it comes to the marketplace, I just want to compete on quality, and I think it's really important to meet people, look them in the eyes, and develop a relationship, because it's not just a carrot. I'm also trying to sell a story in a way that this is my work. I love producing nutritious food, and when you buy it from me, I'm literally handing you the carrots that I grew, and you're looking at the farmer. So it's I try and
it makes perfect sense to me. You can't really it's like, if you want to be local, you got to meet the farmer, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you're selling that. Most of the people there can give local healthy food, but you have a connection.
Yeah.
I in Albuquerque was at the market, and I would see people who they clearly didn't have a plan. They were just showing up with like a truckload of zucchinis one week, and that was the week that everybody else had zucchinis.
Right. So. Yeah, and you also try and plan that where you have I can't necessarily grow tomatoes super early just because of my restrictions. I don't have heating on my property. I have raw off-grid land, but there are people that plan for that. They come early with tomatoes when nobody else has them. Yeah. And we'll take a break when everyone has the tomatoes, and then maybe come a little later in the fall when people's tomatoes have dropped off. So I think that's a smart strategy.
But you're not needing to do that at this point, right?
Well, just my restrictions of the land, like my irrigation water only comes beginning of March, and really to get early tomatoes, you need to have them in the ground early March. I don't live out there, so I can't baby anything too much.
Are you using hoop houses?
Yeah, so I have two. They're called caterpillar tunnels.
Okay.
So they're pretty cheap and easy to put up. So they're affordable houses, but they're not. There's no doors. There's just kind of pull-up sides. So it's essentially just metal hoops with plastic on it, with rope holding it down. I have two of those. They're each 100 feet long, 14 feet wide. So I have those, and then I utilize, floating row covers, mainly in the late spring and early summer when flea beetles come on.
Oh, okay.
And pests like that, where I don't use any sprays or chemicals like that, so I just have a physical barrier from the bugs. And it also helps in the hot part of the summer to keep the moisture in. I utilize floating row cover a lot.
Cool.
And then reuse it.
So can you speak to the problems a little bit? Because that is probably, I'm sure anybody who's starting out, and you have a degree, right? So you probably thought all this through. You have 10 years experience, but somebody who, it could happen to anybody. Something bad could happen with insects or...
Yeah, or a hailstorm. You can get a hailstorm in June, right, when you kind of take everything out from the protection, and then a hailstorm comes and gets everything you got.
Yeah.
So that's just some of the things that will happen. That's just farming. People complain about weather, and farmers have always complained about weather. So that's something that I'm crossing my fingers, hope will never happen, but it happens. But yeah, pests. I have some strategies to help with pests, and last year the major problem was the drought. My Odomo said it was the biggest drought he's ever seen in his life, and he's 60 years old. So that was my first year farming. So I figure if I could get through that, it would be easier.
It's amazing to watch the natural balance, though. Because here we have this year of rain, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's a little bit disconcerting that this is also the wettest year in 20, 30 years. So you have the driest to the wettest in just 2 years in a row. But I guess it's just about being resilient and taking opportunities when they come. So last year there's a few things I didn't do, or I had to pull crops. I had to turn off the irrigation just because they wouldn't make me enough money, and so I had to weigh my risks. I only have this much water, what can I put it towards? So there's some crops I had to pull out. But this year I'm kind of going to go full on and grow a lot of seed corn. I'm going to grow, just some seed experiments, and just kind of because I have the water and I'm a little bit more resourced in my second year. So kind of taking the opportunity in a big abundant year with a lot of moisture to grow some things. And then, who knows, maybe next year will be a huge drought and I won't have that opportunity, but I'll be sitting on a lot of seed.
So what varieties, is there anything that you've discovered, like heirloom varieties that you have grown or want to grow to market? If it looks the same, if it is different, they'll be happy to buy it, but they love something that's different looking too.
Yeah, I try and kind of come with interesting stuff. Maybe you gotta balance familiar with interesting. So I'm really kind of on the purple kick right now. I'm growing a snow pea that's totally purple, that holds its purple after cooking, that I'm excited about. I'm growing a pink celery that I haven't grown before, so we'll see what happens with that. So it's that balance of familiar and interesting.
So are you going to save seeds on all these varieties?
Probably I might do the snow peas because they go to seed fairly quickly. I probably won't mess with the celery. I think we have a little too hot and dry climate to save seed from celery. Let's see what else. Like a blue corn. There's a blue corn from the Pojoaque Pueblo, which is, I'm the first private property right after the Pojoaque Pueblo. I got some blue corn from them, and I'm growing that out, and I save seed for that. I don't necessarily sell it, at least right now. I'm kind of growing out seed to make sure I have enough, and eating some at home for myself, but not quite selling it yet. And let's see what else. Last year I tried a purple Napa cabbage.
Cool.
Didn't quite work out as well as I had hoped. It didn't really head up as good as a green one. So yeah. Those are some things that I like to try that are interesting.
If there are secrets, don't tell them.
Yeah. I still have some secrets in my sleeve.
Thanks for listening. You can reach out to me directly via Facebook or by email to aaron@getinmygarden.com to share ideas and feedback. I love hearing from people. Also, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. Please share your favorite episodes on social media and within relevant groups. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or elsewhere and leave positive reviews. And now, another way to support the show, as I mentioned, is via the new podcast platform called What Pods, where podcast aficionados can vote on podcasts for content and quality and help promote them to other listeners. Check it out. Thanks a lot.